Give us a minute. It's, okay, it's now. This
Okay.
is an interview with Sarah Shakibi from Elsmore Institute.
Ellesmere College. Yes.
Elsmore College. Thank you for agreeing to this interview. And the first thing I'm going to ask you is, what is your role in the computer at the schooling organization?
Okay. So I'm head of computer science, and I'm also a teacher of mathematics. I look after all of the secondary computer science, starting from grade 7. And in the UK, we go up to grade 13.
Mhm.
Do you want me to explain that a little bit more, or?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we have grades, we call them years, you call them grades. Grade 7 to 9 is basically pre-IGCSE, and GCSE is the General Certificate of Education here. It's very important, and basically everything that the children do culminates in grades 10 and 11. They choose something between 10 to 12 subjects in those 2 years of very intense study. And then they have their GCSE examinations. Unfortunately, this is the first time since World War II, this summer, that all examinations have been cancelled.
Oh,
Yes, but that's what the children work and prepare for 2 years. After that, it is pretty much voluntary who wants to stay on. If they do, they go through the A-level program, which is the pre-university. And so far, my department here at Ellesmere College, although it's a very small department, it's been very successful. I've had the best grades, best students. They've gone to Cambridge and Imperial College in London. So I'm very, very proud of them.
congratulations.
Thank you. As I say, it's a very, very small department, but we choose the best. So,
And so in 10th to 11th grade, computer science will be an elective, if I understood correctly.
yes, yes, correct. Yes.
And before that age, it's mandatory. So from
It's
7th to
mandatory. Well, yes and no, because you see, Ellesmere College is a private college. We're a boarding school,
uh-huh.
and we are also an IB school. So we have international students from everywhere.
Uh-huh.
State schools have a mandatory program of computer science. They've had this since 2016. And so everyone in grades 7 to 9 will follow a computer science program for 3 years. And then, as you say, it becomes elective.
Okay. And do you like, in generally, across the country, how many students, what's the percentage of the students who chose a path in computer science?
Oh, I couldn't tell you the
Okay.
exact percentage. Let me give you a little bit of the background and the history. Before the government made computer science mandatory, we used to teach information technology.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is a saying that we say that you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Unfortunately, that's what happened. We threw that out and we completely changed to computer science. So what happened was a real shock to the system.
Uh-huh.
Speaking from experience, I mean,
Yes,
I'm
yes.
guessing that you want the experience that we've been through. So it was a real shock to the system. The children were completely baffled. They didn't know what this new science was all about. A lot of the teachers, a lot of the senior leadership team, again, confused it, as I put in my presentation,
Yes,
with
yes,
information technology. And this is, I think, probably the hurdle that you will face as well,
yes.
this confusion. It is beginning to take better shape now.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want some figures and numbers, I have to tell you that last year we held some training courses here at Ellesmere College for teachers. And the government last year put an extra £45 million into training teachers
Wow.
simply because Out of the 12,000 teachers who are now teaching computer science in the UK, only 4,000 hold a numerate degree, which means, unfortunately, that the rest are struggling.
Right.
I've had teachers coming here who didn't know even what a flowchart was, let alone how to teach it. Programming, the same, pseudocode, computational thinking. So that is what I tried to make quite obvious in that little presentation, that this is going to be a challenge.
And Belen and I were talking about your presentation, and so we have a question for you. And how did the professional development in the UK for computer sciences evolved throughout the time?
Well, it's still evolving. It's very much a work in progress. If you see, the government has given us this mandatory thing, that's fine. The teachers who were in situ, had a numerate degree, made the switch, no problem. The teachers who didn't have the numerate degree, didn't have the necessary background, literally there was panic across the country. And there wasn't really that much CPD to speak of until Computing at School really stepped in and started to. So that is really the leg that we're standing on at the moment.
And what year did Computing at the School step in?
It's been there for a while, but since the beginning, 2016. But the CPD program has become better and better every year.
Oh, good. So what were some criteria or information that you gathered that allowed you to improve your professional development?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yes. Based on what criteria or data did you change your professional development approach to computer science education?
Well, yeah, the data, there is the data from the children and how much they're actually taking away with them. There's also the big cry from the teachers themselves saying that they need the help in order to get on with this. Our examination boards are also very good. They have their own CPD programs.
Okay.
So there is a lot of help available, but not so much by way of accreditation.
I see. How is the Computing at the School program financed?
Oh, that's a government-based scheme, but it is also financed by the British Computing Society.
Okay.
And Computing at School, I don't know if you know or not, has changed names now. Since last year, it has become the National Center for Computer Education, NCC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah, we had that, but I thought it was a new center, not.
No, no, it's the same. It's the same.
Okay, good. That's good to know. Let me ask you another question I have here. Before the Computing at the School jumping, who was offering professional development, and who had the responsibility to provide these programs?
I can't really think of anybody apart from the examination boards, but in 2016, things were not as structured as they are now.
Okay.
So pretty much the teachers were on their own in that respect.
That we thought that was the case, but we wanted to go there. About the National Center for Computing Education, is it organized? This is very important for us to know, because we want to tell the policymakers a way to organize networks of teachers. So is that organized in different districts, or is that centralized in a national base? How do you reach territorially to the schools?
Okay.
That's what we wonder.
Well, it is both, because we have a hierarchical system, but there are people like myself, and there are also people called hub leaders. And a hub leader would designate their school as a hub for learning, which means that the surrounding schools in the area come to you for training.
That's wonderful. And so you have extra time in your position to do that, or that's on top of what you do with no extra payment? How is it organized?
Well, the payment comes from CAS or NCCE.
Okay.
It doesn't come from the school, but for example, here, because we have the facilities, we can have them for day training, or we can have them for twilight evening training. We provide the refreshments, the lunch, the transportation. So yeah, we get the funding from CAS, from BCS, and from NCCE.
And how did the CAS choose you or any other representative? What are or do you apply yourself, or what's the process?
Okay, so in the beginning, in about, I think it was 2016, I used to use CAS for resources, and I used to upload my own resources.
Oh, okay.
The person who's called Simon Humphreys, who's pretty much one of the big people at CAS, he wrote to me and he said, would you like to apply to become a master teacher? So I did. And I was very fortunate that my current school accepted that. What they needed was a lesson observation and some backing information from the school, a reference. So I got that. And the good thing was that when you become a master teacher, the school where you are practicing joins the network of excellence. So we got a certificate. Wow. Yes. So, I mean, it's very nice that way, but
yes.
I would say that it isn't really homogeneous in the sense of uniformity of accreditation across the country. People have got different strengths. My main strength was in mathematics. Others come with strength in programming, but there isn't really a uniform examination that we all sit in order to say, yes, we're computer science teachers.
Okay, I was going to ask you if they provide any training for you, the master teachers, or is just the entry exam?
It was just simply by the references that they obtained from our schools.
Okay.
At the time. There are no more master teachers now. I think that scheme finished last year.
Okay.
But the CPD continues very much. Yeah.
Okay. So, and how is it viewed by your colleagues, by the rest of the teachers, that you are now a leader teacher or a master teacher, or how does it culturally?
I think I'm the maverick in the school because some people find CS extremely difficult to understand. Some people think it's still IT. So we have all sorts, it's a mixed bag.
Well, I can totally relate to that because we have the same issues here in Latin America. We haven't not advanced as much as your country, but we still struggle with some of the same tensions. Let me ask you, what was the approach for teaching training? Do you have a model for teacher training, or is pretty much every master teacher designs a pedagogy around teacher training?
Yeah, there are various schemes available and various amounts of funding available around the country. Very much depends on the area where you live. You probably know the South is much more well-funded than the North.
No, so
there is a big North-South divide. And obviously teachers who are teaching and practicing in London have access to much, much more training in CPD than, say, if you're up in the North in the farms, somewhere. So it is quite different, but there isn't a national CPD program, no.
Oh, okay. So you design your training yourself. You decide how the teachers are going to learn.
Yes.
You don't have a reference or a mandate.
No, and I think in state schools, it pretty much is dictated by the head teacher.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask you the role of CAS in the National Center for Computing Education, but you already clarified that. Can you clarify in which ways this National Center for Computing Education articulates with other organizations? If it
What
does,
other, sorry, what other organizations?
like you mentioned the British Society,
Computer Society.
Computer Society,
Yeah.
or the Ministry of Education.
Yeah. Well, CAS or NCCE is funded by the Department for Education and British Computer Society. There is, am I able to present something to you here or not?
Sure.
I can't see have you heard of STEM?
Yes.
So STEM is one of the biggest organizations that works with NCCE. So the programs that we ran at Ellesmere College were all funded by STEM. STEM works with the universities in each district. The districts, the universities get the funding, and that funding is then disseminated to the schools.
Okay, so that funding is for curriculum materials primarily, or?
No, this is for CPD.
Oh, for professional development. Yeah. Okay. And how is the National Center for Computers Education relation with the private sector, with Microsoft, Google, BBC, or the Raspberry Pi Foundation?
Oh, very good. Yeah, very, very good. A couple of years ago, CAS was also presenting. We have the London BET show, which is the big information technology show every year in London. And Google was part of the stands for NCCE. So there is a lot of cooperation there. Google have also given us some very nice resources for primary school teaching. So this isn't just CPD now. Google have been very active in producing resources for teaching in the classroom. Raspberry Pi, Arduino, they are all doing the same. In a private school, you don't get that much of these.
Okay. So in general, what would you identify as the strength of the program in your country, of introducing computer science in schools in your country? What are some of the things that you may tell us if we wanted to do this that have worked?
That's a difficult question, because at the same time that it has really nurtured this potential in some very able children across the country, it has also, unfortunately, put a lot of people off the subject. I have to tell you what I told the head teacher of this school. Computer science is not for the faint-hearted, in so much as it is the most difficult subject the children are currently doing in the UK. Examination boards are constantly making it harder. Which I don't mind, but a lot of teachers do mind that, and children are struggling. So by not having the information technology option anymore, we are having people who are completely scared of CS and will not even come near it. Our biggest problem is recruiting girls. Girls are very scared, and we've been struggling with getting the girls' numbers up in our classrooms, and we're not there yet.
So, yeah, and it's an international concern. So if you have to run this program again, what would you do differently?
What would I do? I would definitely start it from year 7, as they are doing at the moment, but I would water it down in some respects, and I would strengthen it in others. At the moment, what is happening in classrooms is there's been this buzz about computational thinking. It's been going around for many years now. But I don't think many teachers would be able to actually say what computational thinking is. And can you give somebody in the classroom something which is an example of computational thinking? And more importantly than that, what computer science requires is not just computational thinking, but algorithmic thinking, which is missing, I think, 95% of schools right now. This is a thing that I'm very passionate about myself. Can I give you a small example?
Yes, please.
Okay, so if you ask a child in grade 9, for example, to calculate the area of a rectangle, and if they're good at maths, they will say, okay, it's the length times the width. Job done, finished, easy. Try to do the same thing with a computer program. You've got to think about it as an input, process, output. What inputs do I need? What variables do I need to create? Where do I store them? What happens to them? All of this algorithmic thinking is a new layer upon mathematics, which wasn't there before. So it is a shock when children are asked to think in a flowchart process.
Yes.
They find this the hardest part. They consider the computer, and most of them can code. But you ask them to put that down on paper as an algorithm, and 99% will struggle. And this is where I think we haven't done enough in the classroom. Not for the students and not for the teachers.
So you will introduce algorithmic thinking earlier. That would be...
Yes, absolutely.
And currently, how is it introduced in 7th to 10th grade in the mandatory school system? I know you mentioned that your school is different, but just to get a larger picture of what is going on in the country.
Yeah, again, going back to Google, Google has done a lot for this. We have a lot of software that we use that does somehow use algorithmic thinking. For example, one of the sites we use is called Code Combat. I don't know if you've heard of them or not.
No. Code
Combat, they're quite expensive, but what they do is they do programming within games. We also have another very famous place that we use, which is called Hour of Code.
Yes.
And the block coding is probably the closest we get to algorithmic thinking.
Okay. And so, sorry to interrupt.
That's fine. Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask if, so you would say that in 7th to 10th grade you use block coding. Is that correct? Is that a right statement or not?
No, block coding is mainly in primary school.
Okay.
We use it in grades 7 and 8. In my school, I have introduced the pre-GCSE scheme, which means that my grade 9 actually start working towards that certificate. They start 1 year early. And so year 9 is a testing stone for them. Either they like it and they carry on, or they completely don't like it and they just drop it.
And what language do you use for
Python? We use Python in year 9, yes, and it's been very successful.
Oh, okay. Is there a culture of the makers culture in the UK?
What do you mean? Sorry.
Like with making automatization with tangible elements?
In state schools, yes. And probably because we have got another subject called design and technology, that happens more in design and technology. So Raspberry Pi, Arduino, a lot of these, BBC Micro, they are used more in the design and technology. We do the more theoretical.
And is the design and technology a mandatory assignment? No, also an elective.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
What is the articulation, the curriculum articulation between design and technology and computer sciences?
Probably nothing.
Okay.
Unless particular schools want to go down a cooperation line. They are quite similar in some strands of the curriculum. In the designing of an object or a software. They go through the same processes. But in most schools that I know, there isn't much articulation in that respect between the two departments.
Mm-hmm. And how is the curriculum defined? The type of language that you use or materials that you use? Is that the decision upon the teacher or the school or the district? Who decides the curriculum?
Well, there are various curricula that we can use coming from three main examination boards. So in the UK, we have 3 exam boards, and then we also have the Cambridge International and the IB. So we are fortunate in this school to have Cambridge International and IB as well as the UK. And it is pretty much once you have the head of the department chooses the curriculum.
Okay.
And then with that comes the language. But the good thing is that all of these examination boards allow you 3 or 4 different choices of language. So Delphi, Visual Basic, Python, and C#.
Okay. But it's basically a school choice.
Yes.
It waters down to the head of the department.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so in general, in schools in general, not just in computer science, do you have a culture of problem-based learning or project-based learning or interdisciplinary learning?
Right. There was the rote learning, which you didn't mention. The rote learning, unfortunately, went out with the baby. That went out as well. And now we're suffering in mathematics because of that. Most of our learning is by discovery. So open-ended questions. And we find that our international students, particularly those coming from the Far East and the Middle East, struggle with that. Because they want to have something defined and told to them exactly in steps 1 to n. And if we say just go ahead and explore, they find it very confusing.
There is a famous curriculum author. His name is Basil Bernstein. Do you know him?
I've heard.
He's from the UK.
Yeah,
and
I've heard.
In the 70s, 80s, he wrote precisely of what you are mentioning, that the very open curriculum doesn't benefit all the children.
No,
especially those who need more structure. So yeah, it's definitely a tension, because you do want to teach every kid that higher order level thinking, the planning, the taking decisions. But on the other hand, there are some students who are left behind in the process. So I see what you're saying.
But I have to add here that we are kind of required to differentiate in every lesson. So therefore, for example, my lessons would have 3 different bands. We have the simple band that everyone must finish. We have the middle band that about 60 to 70% will get there. And then we have the top band, which is for the high achievers. So if you introduce the process of differentiation, which is very difficult for the teacher, if you have it almost mandatory in the classroom, then I think you've got a much better chance of success over a bigger group of children.
And are those levels, the simple, the middle, and the top, are those still inquiry oriented, or is it the case that at the simple level you do more of rote learning, kind of identifying and replicating algorithms, and on the top level you do project learning? How does it work?
Yes, so in the simple steps we tell them exactly what they need to do step by step, and then we gradually lead towards more open-ended extensions.
And I imagine that you follow the process of the children's learning, and then you can move the children towards the middle or the top level based on their performance, or once they are in one level, they remain on that level for the whole school year? How does it work?
No, I mean, ideally, what you mentioned would be good, but within the school year, we cannot really move people unless we see that there is a very big difference between the child's achievement and the rest of the group.
Okay. And how does the inquiry-based learning and discovery learning and the project-based learning work within the computer science teachers? How do you see that, how teachers are embracing this pedagogical approach, if they are? Tell us about that.
It's a mixed bag. As I said, you probably know 2/3 are not coming from the right background. So it takes a very young and enthusiastic teacher with no background in CS to actually embrace that philosophy and run with it. Unfortunately, it isn't the majority. So, yeah. So that is why I made it so clear to you, in my presentation. You've got to choose really bright and numerate graduates for this. And then you really have to invest in the training. If the training isn't there, No,
absolutely. Yeah. And so in terms of training, the training of the teacher, and this is going to be the last question I'm going to let you.
Sure.
I think from what I am getting at your discourse is the importance of the subject knowledge training. Is that correct? How would you? What can you tell us about that? What can you tell to policymakers who are thinking about a teacher training program? What is it important to include in terms of content, pedagogical content, computer science content in this training?
Can you tell me, have you already got a curriculum in place or not yet?
Well, the ADEL, the organization that I'm working for, is a consortium of different countries in Latin America. So there are some countries that have, like Uruguay, I would say is a more advanced country who has been introducing, they call it computational thinking since elementary school. And they, on an inquiry-based approach, so they do project-based learning, moving on to computational problems. In my country, it's not as intense as in Uruguay. We have some basic content knowledge that every province must implement in elementary and secondary school. However, the educational system in my country is federal. So each province has the autonomy to decide when and how this content is going to be offered in the school.
Okay.
So we have some provinces that have already included that in the area of mathematics, for example, in high school. And we have some other provinces who are saying this is going to be transversal. Everybody, the language art teacher, the history teacher has to teach the concept of computer science. I don't really know what they're thinking about. Yeah, I'm looking at your eyes.
That is scary. That is scary.
It's just unimaginable for me. But people are creative in Argentina, let me tell you.
Okay, so based on that, the answer to your question is that obviously the curriculum is going to dictate what kind of training the teacher needs.
Yeah.
Now, the most important ab initio requirement is numeracy, which a lot of teachers probably don't have or are uncomfortable with. I don't know about Argentina. I know about the UK. It is not a very favorite thing, being numerate. It's much more cliquey to be arty rather than being numerate, especially females. They don't think it's cool enough to be, in that kind of thing. Now, as for the pedagogy, and what I think I touched on this. So basically, if your teacher is going to be confident in front of the classroom, your teacher does need to have at least one programming language under their belt. And at least, let's say, a term or two. I don't know how the teacher training in this country is 1 year. So probably in that 1 year of training, they should have enough knowledge of flowcharting, pseudocode, algorithmic thinking, design of algorithms. And then we come to this huge problem of the Pandora's box of computational thinking. You know, I've been working on this for a long time on the different syllabi in the world. And I started off with the International Baccalaureate. The IB put this term across as one of Jeanette Wing's ideas from Carnegie Mellon University. Yeah. But I don't think they've unpacked it very well in the IB system. If you look at their syllabus, it requires 45 hours of computational thinking out of the 200 hours of tuition. But then you look at the strands that are in there, and they are all over the place. There is no real logical progression. And this is where most teachers begin to stumble, because the average teacher just doesn't know what computational thinking is supposed to be, let alone teach it. Mm-hmm. So the best thing probably would be to have a very simple transition from mathematical-based problems to the same in programming. Just like the example I gave you some time ago, you know, very basic examples from maths, and you transfer them and make them into computer programs. That takes you through computational thinking. It takes you through algorithm design to its very end, which is the program. Mm-hmm. So I would say probably the best thing you can do for your teachers is to just really plug this part of the curriculum.
Let me ask you, is there any entry requirements for the teachers who want to take the CAS or the national NCC training? Yeah. Sorry, training.
They've got to, well, the new scheme is that they've got to do 40 hours of training. And then after the 40 hours of training, they produce 2 projects that they have to submit as part of their accreditation. But there isn't, well, we have got bona fide computer science teachers coming out of university, and we train some of them here. So they are very different to the ones in CAS, because you see, the ones who are doing the training in CAS do not come from that background. If somebody's done computer science at school or university, then they just do an additional year on top, which is the teacher training. And that year is spent inside schools. Yes, so that's very important. Yeah. But if someone does not have that background, they would have to rely on CAS and NCC too.
They don't have a minimal entry requirement.
The minimal entry requirement would be a degree, but not really a numerate degree.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think I cover all of my questions. I don't know if you have some for me.
No, not really, because I was very surprised when I got your emails. You know.
I'm going to stop the recording now so we can talk more.